Hello and welcome to the World Wanders podcast, your source for travel stories, travel destinations, and travel philosophy.
I'm Amanda.
I'm Ryan.
And we're your hosts. Hello and welcome to another episode of the World Wanderers podcast. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of the show. Before we dive into today's episode, we just wanted to give a little shout out to a couple of our community members on Patreon. A huge shout out and welcome to Tyler O, as well as to James W. We are so excited that you're a part of the World Wanderers Insider. And if you listening to the show would like to join the World Wanderers Insider and get exclusive content on how to become a digital nomad, you can head on over to patreon.com/The World Wanderers.
And to this week's episode, we are really excited to be sharing an interview that we did with Jackie Bolen from eslspeaking.org. Teaching English abroad is something that has come up a lot of times on the podcast, whether it's episodes with people who have traveled to Taiwan, Korea, or other places. It is a great opportunity to go out and see the world and do it in a way that doesn't require you to have a ton of savings already and can give you some great experiences. And Jackie has an incredible wealth of knowledge around teaching abroad. She spent over 10 years working and teaching English in South Korean universities, founding a website that is an incredible resource for ESL and aspiring ESL teachers. And now she's back in Canada, but she's still supporting ESL teachers. So on this week's episode, we really dive deep into teaching English abroad. We start from scratch and overview the different types of jobs that exist, the different countries that are good targets, and lots more. So if you've ever thought about teaching English abroad, or you're just curious of what life might be like for someone who spent a decade working in a different country teaching English, this is your episode. You're going to get a lot of great information. And if you want to find out more, head to theworldwanderers.com and we'll have show notes with all the resources mentioned and links to go out and connect with Jackie Bolen.
All right, now on to the episode. Jackie, welcome to the podcast today. We're super excited to have you here with us.
Thanks so much for having me.
And where are you joining us from today?
I am in Vancouver, Canada.
Oh, nice. That's awesome. We lived in Vancouver for a couple months earlier this year. It's one of our favorite cities.
Oh, it's so nice. Yeah, I went to grad school here and then went to Korea for a few years. And yeah, just when I thought about moving back to Canada, there's no other place that I wanted to move to. So yeah.
Where are you from originally in Canada?
I grew up in Edmonton, Alberta, which is, if you people listening don't know, it's pretty terrible. They have the big mall, but I mean,
like, we know.
You know, in wintertime it can be like -40 or like, yeah, it's there's no mountains and no ocean, so yeah, it's not a great place to live, in my opinion. Some people love it, but
all our Edmonton listeners are like, boo.
So they probably agree with me. Actually, I would be surprised if someone was like a diehard. Would defend Edmonton to the death. So unless they're a big Oilers fan, I guess, then that might be the only exception. So,
I mean, I grew up just outside of Calgary, and like I love that area. It's like amazing, but I would never ever try to defend the winter to anyone. Like there's a reason I'm not there right now. It's so horrible.
It's bad. I try to like usually just go visit my parents who still live there in the summertime, and then kind of avoid it in the winter. So that's been my kind of strategy, I guess, for that.
Yeah, so we are excited to talk about kind of your journey when it comes to travel and teaching English. And I'm curious if you could just give us like, you know, the really quick overview of your experience going abroad, deciding to be an English teacher, how long you were over there, what eventually brought you back to Canada, and kind of all of that.
Yeah, sure. So I went to university in Calgary, and I did like counseling psychology as my major. And then I did a practicum in that, like before I graduated. And I just kind of realized, this isn't for me. I met a whole bunch of people working in that field. And it was like very low pay and high stress. And I just kind of like saw my life doing that. And I just didn't really feel like it was going to be what I wanted for my life. So I just thought, I'll just go like teach English for a year and then see how it goes. So yeah, I ended up going to Korea mostly just because it was kind of like, back then, it was, I guess, 15 years ago, it was super easy to get a job in Korea with just like, I don't know, like a 5-minute phone interview, and they send you a plane ticket in the mail, and like the visa requirements were pretty easy. yeah, so I ended up there and I just taught there for a year and then came back and went to grad school. And yeah, the whole time I was in grad school, I just kind of felt like, oh, I just miss Korea. And yeah, since I had a master's degree, I thought, I could just go back and get like university jobs, which are quite good jobs. So yeah, that's what I ended up doing for about 10 more years or 9 more years, I guess it was. And then, yeah, I moved back to Canada 4 years ago. Yeah.
Wow, that's quite the adventure, and that's awesome. Where did you go to school in Calgary?
I went to this place called Rocky Mountain College. This
Okay,
is like
cool.
a small college. I don't even know. I think they still exist, actually. Maybe. I think they
Yeah,
merged with someone else or something. And yeah, I'm not exactly sure the whole story.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm not 100% sure either. I was just like, oh, that's cool, because we both went to U of C, so small world.
Oh, cool.
And so what was it like moving over to Korea after having done, you've lived in Edmonton, you've studied in Calgary, and then you go to Korea, which is like a completely different world from Western Canada?
I mean, I remember just when I first got there, it was like, I think they picked me up at the airport, or no, from the bus station in Cheonan, which is like an hour south of Seoul. And they brought me to my apartment, and then it was like nighttime when we got there. And they were like, okay, there's the bakery, there's the grocery store, there's like whatever, the chicken restaurant. And I was like, oh, I was like so tired and like didn't really take it in. There's the school, come here on Monday at like 8:00. And then I remember waking up that next morning and just like, it was the days before internet or like, well, I guess people had internet, but not at their houses. And like, obviously there was no smartphones. So I just kind of like looked out my window and I was like, oh no, like, where do I get food? And like, how can I just kind of I felt so alone. And like, yeah, so I just remember walking out my apartment or whatever. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to walk down the street this one direction. Cause I was super scared of getting lost. I was into some like random neighborhood and like, I didn't even really know my address. And so I was just like, okay, I'm going to walk down this one street and see what's going on. And then walk down back to where I live and then go the other direction. So I just remember it was like super intimidating and scary. But I mean, after a week or two, it kind of started to feel more like home, I guess. And I like figured out some things and met some other foreign teachers, which obviously was kind of a game changer in terms of like them showing me restaurants and like where to get food and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, but that first weekend was tough for sure.
And then after your first year there, when you went back to Canada to go to grad school, were you thinking at that time that you would like to come back and stay and kind of live long term in Korea? Or were you kind of thinking like, oh, that was a great 1 year adventure, and then it was only later on that it kind of fate brought you back?
I wasn't really thinking about going back. My actual like plan was to go was to finish grad school and then to go get a PhD. But when I was in grad school, I kind of just realized like, and I actually worked at the library in the grad school. So I kind of saw like, oh, these are the people that should do a PhD that are in the library, like every single night studying and like have like 50 books on the table. And I just kind of compared myself to like the top students that I was studying with. And I just thought like, oh, I don't really have what it takes. And maybe I could, but I just didn't want to like spend another 5 or 7 years of my life or whatever sitting in a library studying. And so I kind of just let go of that plan that I had. And then, I just thought, oh, maybe Korea. And I had missed it the whole time. So yeah, I decided to go do that.
And then, so when you went back the second time, like, did you work for the same company? Did you go back to the same city? Like, what did it sort of look like when you went back that second time?
My old friend from my first year in Korea, he helped me get a job at his school that he had taught at. So I taught there for, I guess, a year. And then at that time, I was like, I had 1 or 2 more classes to finish for my grad school. So I was doing like online stuff just to finish that up. And then that whole year, I kind of had the idea, okay, just like get the degree. And then I was going to apply for university jobs. So again, after that year, I kind of used connections that I had and then ended up getting like 2 offers for universities in the city that I was living in. So ended up staying at that university for 5 years. And then it was in the countryside and it was like really beautiful. There was like, we had a big garden and like a fire pit, and like we used to have barbecues, and it was a cool experience for sure. But then I just got tired of the countryside, and so I applied for jobs in like Seoul and Busan, the two biggest cities in Korea, and then ended up taking a job in Busan, and then went there for 4 years. And so that was kind of my experience moving into university jobs, I guess.
Yeah, wow, that sounds so interesting. What was it like living in the countryside of Korea? And we've been to Seoul for, I guess, a week, but we haven't been anywhere else in Korea. And even Seoul is like pretty like overstimulating. There's a little bit of like culture shock that kind of happens as a Canadian. I think when you get there, I can't even imagine like getting out into the countryside area of Korea where, you know, it would be just as different, but probably in a different way as well.
I mean, I kind of loved it, actually. It was like, I guess I was fortunate in that there was about 15 foreign teachers, and we all lived in the same building. It was like kind of this 3-story, I don't know, I guess like similar to like a condo complex or whatever. And then we all like had offices in the same hallway. And so we would like hang out all the time. And it was actually so fun. One guy like taught us how to play tennis. We used to play tennis all the time, and like we played board games, and I used to homebrew beer. So we'd have like beer and board game nights like a few times a week. And I would always organize like a big Halloween bonfire, and I'd organize like the big kind of community garden that we had. And I bought a scooter as well. So I would take the scooter around the countryside and go on like day trips to like temples and hiking, and like I would go camping on the beaches. And so I mean, I had a really great time. I like loved it for the most part, but actually why I ended up leaving was that my 3 best friends during that time, they ended up going to other countries like Vietnam and Malaysia and whatever. So I just was so lonely for one semester, so about 6 months. And I just was like, oh, I got to get out of here. This is not for me anymore. So that was kind of the only reason I left, but actually living in the countryside was quite a good experience for me.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. And then what was it like to live in Busan?
Busan is amazing. It's like the kind of like tourist city in Korea. It's got so many beaches. So it's kind of, it was fun because the social activity, like for, I don't know, a big part of the year, like say 6 or 7 months, kind of revolves around like, which beach should we go to tonight? And then you can like, unlike in Canada, you can drink in public, like on beaches or whatever. So you just go to the convenience store and get a few beers and like hang out. And there was one beach actually close to where I lived, and it was the big surfing beach. So I bought a stand-up paddleboard and like got really into stand-up paddleboard surfing. So I used to do that all the time. And then it was kind of a lawless beach. It was kind of underdeveloped at that time. So we used to have like big bonfires on the beach and camping and that kind of stuff. So it was cool to like, it's the second biggest city in Korea, but it's like we would go camping on the beach and have a bonfire at nighttime. And I mean, it was great. It was it's an amazing city, and I would definitely recommend anyone, if you're going to Korea, don't just go to Seoul. Also, definitely check out Busan as well.
Yeah, it sounds really cool. And we definitely did that as well, where I think we were only there for like a week. So we were like, our philosophy's always been, it's better to get to know something well than to like move around all over the place. But definitely need to go back to Korea and check out everything else that's there other than Seoul.
Yeah, it's worth a trip in the summertime for sure. It's like, you could go spend like weeks in Busan actually. And I had an Airbnb. In my apartment in Busan, I had a spare room, so I did Airbnb, and I used to get a ton of like travelers from Europe and places around other parts of Asia, and they used to come specifically for like the beaches, and they like loved it. They thought it was a great city in general. So
that's awesome. And at what point did you think or start thinking about creating a website and kind of building resources to help other people go and teach English?
Well, I guess it kind of just started like, I was blogging just for fun about teaching in a Korean university. And at that time, I was the only one talking about it. And I was the only one talking about like Korean university jobs and how to get them and qualifications and that kind of stuff. So it actually became quite popular. And it was like, then at that time, I would get all these like reader questions about how can I get a uni job? And I was like, oh, I should write a book and put all this information into one resource or whatever, just to make it helpful for people. Instead of like searching around on my website, they could just get this book for like a couple bucks and then have all those details. So I did that, and it ended up selling quite a few copies actually. And so that was kind of when I was like, oh, this is actually like people want this information that I have. So I started writing more books, and then I started a couple different websites, and I actually ended up abandoning that old original website I had, and then kind of like revamped it and made it into a better website. So yeah, that's how I started. It was just kind of just for fun originally, and then it became my job eventually when people bought some books and I guess liked what I had to say.
Yeah, that's really cool. I think that's a common story too. It's like you start doing something, you start creating something, and then it's kind of like following a trail. Like you don't know where it's going to end. You don't really know. I mean, for us with the podcast, it's similar. You start doing something, people start like interacting with it, and that kind of shapes what you do. And so it's really cool to hear that story as well. And I'm really excited to dive into a bit of like the lay of the land of English teaching in Korea. We've had a few different interviews over the past kind of, I guess, dating back to like 4 years at this point, where we interviewed a friend who had taught at an international school there. And so we know there's kind of a bit of like, there's like certain schools that are just for English teaching, and that really, if you have just any type of degree from Canada to the US, that type of thing, you can go teach at, even if you're not a teacher. There's international schools, there's university jobs. Could you give us kind of like a lay of the land when it comes to the opportunities that exist for teaching in Korea?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, your friend at the international school, that's kind of like the unusual experience. There isn't that many of those jobs available. So that's like, that doesn't really represent, I guess, the majority of the English teachers in Korea. It's like there's a few jobs like that, but I guess the majority of people would end up teaching at one of three places. So the first is the Hagwon. So it's, if you've heard of like the Japanese cram school, that's basically what it is. It's like a private language institute. So some of them are like for kindergarten kids. So you would work, say, like 10 to 6, teach kindergarten and elementary, or some are just like elementary, kind of middle school, high school. So you teach like, say, 3 to 10 at night or something like that. And then there's some adult hagwons as well. So you would often teach, like, have a split shift, like the morning and then the night shift when the adults are off work. So that's quite an easy job to get. You can get them with like just a BA and then your transcripts and criminal record check and all that, just kind of the basic qualifications. And the next job is in public schools. So you're kind of like an assistant language teacher and working with one of the Korean English teachers. But it's like due to demographics in Korea, those jobs are getting cut. So it's like Korea's had one of the lowest birth rates in the world for, I don't know, say the past like 10 or even 20 years. So schools are closing, like especially elementary schools. So those public school jobs are kind of fewer and fewer, and it's tough and they're quite competitive. And I think at this point in time, you almost have to have a bachelor's degree of education or like be a certified teacher or do something like that to even kind of compete for those jobs. So, and then finally, there's university jobs. So to get those, you need like a master's degree. And then to actually really, really compete, you need a master's degree plus 2 years of experience teaching adults. So, yeah, those are the basic jobs, and kind of the Hagwon are like the lowest in terms of like benefits and pay. And then you move up to the university jobs, which are quite good in terms of like vacation time and usually pay and overtime opportunities and that kind of thing. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Thanks for breaking that down. And I'm curious, like, if somebody's listening and they're interested in potentially becoming an English teacher or moving abroad, what do you need to be able to start working for the Hagwon or to get a job there?
You just basically need like a BA and yeah, that's about it. So, but you have to have a passport from like one of the big 6 countries. So USA, Canada, England, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, and Ireland, I think it is. So yeah, that plus a clean criminal record check. And I mean, to get all your paperwork done and everything, it takes, I don't know, probably 2 or 3 months. So be a little bit organized and starting ahead of time to like get your stuff together. But yeah, it's not super difficult to get a hagwon job in Korea.
Is that sort of the same like job that you started in, except just like obviously a little bit more competitive now?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So 15 years ago, that was exactly, I went through a recruiter and then got a hagwon job in super easily, just a short phone interview. So now I think maybe like Korea is just somehow more popular. I think like the Korean wave of like K-pop and all that kind of stuff. I think more and more people want to come to Korea. So even those hagwon jobs are a little bit more difficult. Plus the government has like tightened up their regulations for sure, and require just more paperwork and more things to get that job.
Yeah, I mean, that definitely makes sense. I feel like if I think about like the media 15 years ago, you didn't really see like much about Korea and like, I guess not the media, like pop culture type stuff. And now, I mean, Korea's very much made a name for itself as a country that has like its own style of pop culture with K-pop and that sort of thing. So,
oh yeah, it's like huge. I mean, it's like whenever I tell people, oh, I lived in Korea for 10 years. People are like, oh my God, I like love Korea. Or I'm like, I love Korean food. I'm studying Korean. Or like, I just hear that all the time. Like just people that I would not even expect would care about Korea or like they love Korea. So it's definitely a popular place these days.
yeah, that's pretty cool.
And so we've talked on our show a bit with different people who have English teaching experience about how it's just a really cool way. I think a lot of people when, whether it's coming out of university or early on in life and career, not really knowing where you want to go, and maybe you're really excited about traveling, exploring new places, how it's a really cool opportunity to kind of find out more about what you do and don't like career-wise and get tons of really cool travel experiences. When you're talking to people who are kind of coming to you, reading your book, using your website, that type of thing, and are looking to go into English teaching, what do those people like tend to be like, and what are they kind of thinking about and feeling at that time when they're considering it?
I guess like there's kind of two groups of people. So the first one is just like people that are just in university or just out of university and want like a little bit of an adventure or something like that. And they, I guess, are just kind of wondering like, oh, am I going to end up at this terrible hagwon, or like, how can I avoid that? Or like, what city should I go to? Should I go to the countryside? Is that okay? Will that be terrible? Or like, so they kind of have questions like that. And then I also get a lot of questions from, I guess, more experienced teachers who are maybe teaching in different places, and they maybe have like a family and kids and are wondering how that works out if they end up like teaching at a university job in Korea, and can they do a phone interview, or should they come for an in-person interview, like fly to Korea to do this? Is that crazy? So it's like kind of the two groups. One is just people that want an adventure for a year, and then definitely there's like also professional teachers who want to get into Korean university jobs as a good option for their careers. So.
This episode is brought to you in part by Away. Away creates thoughtful products designed to change how you see the world. They started with the perfect suitcase crafted with features that make travel more seamless. Now they offer a range of essentials that solve real travel problems, so all you have to think about is where you're headed next.
Yeah, we just got back from a weekend trip to Boquete here in Panama, and we took our Away suitcase with us. It was the right size for us both to fit what we needed for the weekend into it. We were able to take a carry-on, which along with our backpacks meant we had tons of space, but didn't have to wait in long lines to check the bag or to wait to pick up the bag. So it was perfect. And with all the wheeling around you have to do at some airports, it was really easy and smooth to push the bag around.
One of the things that we love best about Away is that they offer a range of suitcases made of different materials in a variety of colors and sizes. So whoever you are and whatever you need to pack, Away has luggage that will help you make your next trip more seamless, like our last trip to Boquete.
Away products are designed to last a lifetime. If part of your suitcase breaks, Away's customer service team will arrange to have it fixed or replaced. And there's a 100-day trial on everything Away makes. So you can take the product out on the road, live with it, travel with it, even get lost with it for 100 days. And if you decide it's not for you, you can return it and get your money back. Start your risk-free 100-day trial and shop the entire Away lineup of travel essentials, including their best-selling suitcases, at awaytravel.com/wonders. And when you go to checkout, use the code WANDERS to receive $20 off your purchase.
Once again, that's awaytravel.com/wanders and use the code WANDERS to get $20 off your purchase. Start your risk-free 100-day trial and shop the entire Away lineup of travel essentials today. If there's people who are listening who are excited about that opportunity, what are some things that you can start to do while you're still in your home country to, I guess, like prepare yourself to get these jobs a little bit easier since it is a bit more competitive now?
Well, I think if you haven't already decided on a major in university, if you're serious about being an English teacher, then I would definitely do like TESOL degree or English or education. Maybe I think actually education is a great option because that would actually qualify you for all the university jobs quite easily. Plus you would have, if you decide that teaching abroad isn't for you, you have an option to go back to your home country to teach, or you also have the option of international schools. So I would say it never hurts to have an education degree, and it's you've kind of opened up the door to a ton of different jobs as well. So that, and then another thing you could do is do the SALTA certificate. So it's not super recognized in Korea, although it did help me get my second university job. The foreign teacher who was screening the resumes said oh, you just did the SALTA. And it's I kind of moved to the top of the list, and they're only hiring, I think 2 people and had hundreds of applications, and ended up getting the job. And I think that's kind of was a big factor in that. So it can help you definitely get those jobs, and you will be a better teacher at the end of it, which is also very important. If you want to stay at your school and get promotions and get overtime opportunities and that kind of thing, just being a better teacher is always a good thing. And for your students too, obviously, you want to do a good job teaching them. And then the other thing is that I would do a little bit of research about the paperwork requirements for it, and just kind of have that in the back of your mind that stuff takes longer than you think it will. So even a year ahead of time, just have a quick look and to see if there's things you can kind of I don't know, just have in your head, a bookmark in your browser about okay, this is how I get a criminal record check. And this is how can I get transcripts from my university, and just kind of do a little bit of research about that kind of thing.
Yeah, those are all really helpful tips. And I think especially planning ahead, because I think so often it's as travelers, I guess, or people who are interested in travel, it's you can end up in the situation where you're okay, I'm not happy at home doing what I'm doing. What else could I do? Maybe I could go teach English. And I think that it's it sounds like it's not as simple as just applying and then going. It's you do have to be a little bit prepared beforehand in order to get those jobs.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, it can also take time to tie up things in your home country as well, I guess, depending on how complicated your life is. But yeah, even just giving notice of the place you're renting, or some people sell their house or sell their car, and it's all that stuff takes time. So yeah, definitely the more organized you can be, the better experience you'll have overall, both leaving and then also going to your new country.
And so you talked about how you spent the majority of your career in Korea, or your time in Korea, in university jobs, and that's kind of when it comes to benefits and quality of life, really a great place to be, although there's a lot more requirements to get there. What does that kind of day-to-day look like in terms of those jobs? I imagine there's quite a bit of variety, but what is kind of, working at a university as an English teacher entail?
Sure. So it's actually, it kind of depends on the university for sure. But in terms of teaching hours per week, it varies between 9 is kind of the minimum you would see, and then it can go up to say 18 teaching hours a week or something like that. So for every teaching hour you have, obviously you have to do preparation, and then you have to give homework assignments and administer tests and that kind of thing. So you have grading, and then you have to submit final grades at the end of the semester. So even though the teaching hours aren't super heavy, it's there's kind of a steep learning curve at the beginning in terms of lesson planning and that kind of thing. So there's unlike a lot of other jobs, there's actually teaching jobs, there's nobody kind of micromanaging you. It's you're really on your own in many cases. So, I mean, it's up to you what you do, but it's a university, and the students are paying money to be there in those classes, and they have kind of high expectations for what you'll actually do and what you'll actually teach and how you'll teach them and that kind of thing. So it can be a lot of work at the beginning, but then it gets easier with time because you often end up teaching the same classes over and over again. So just save your stuff in Google Drive or whatever, and then it's quite simple. But at the beginning it's a lot, but sorry. And then there's also like a lot of overtime opportunities at most places. So even though the teaching hours are light, I ended up doing a lot of overtime in some cases, in some semesters, like almost doubling probably my teaching hours. So you can make more money with that. And I don't know. That's about it, I guess.
Okay. Yeah. That's cool. You conceptualize it. And so if something we've kind of heard from talking to people is that, and you kind of hinted at it earlier, sometimes those Hagwon jobs can be like people, I think there's like nightmare stories out there, people making like just like ditching Korea overnight because they don't want to deal with
the midnight run.
Yeah. And all of that type of stuff. If someone is like, in like they've taught in a situation more like that, where it's like, great, they're in, whether it's Korea, Taiwan, they've had a really good experience living abroad and they enjoy teaching, but there's some things they don't really like. It sounds like university jobs are a lot better, but the education requirements are higher. What kind of like, if you were like, let's say you taught that first year in a Hagwon and you're like, oh, I'd love to go work at one of these university jobs. You said you need to get a master's degree to be able to get that type of job, right?
Yes. Yeah, that's like the very minimum requirement. Yes.
And so does that typically, like if let's say you were talking to someone who was like plotting out this plan, like what would that kind of look like in terms of having to go back home usually to a North American university? Or how would you kind of advise someone who's like, I teach at Hagwon now and I want to get to the point of being able to get that type of job?
Actually, there's like a lot of teachers in Korea who did, it's like Framingham State, it's called, I think. It's like a university somewhere in the US. And anyway, they did like in-person kind of cohorts for a master's in TESOL. And I think there's like the University of, I don't know, there's a couple other like universities who have kind of similar things in Korea. So it actually is possible to do your MA TESOL in Korea. And I'd imagine in other countries around the world, there's probably other universities doing similar kind of things. So you definitely can do your master's that way without having to go home first, which is kind of a nice option because you can keep working and like not spend a ton of money going back home and going to school full time. It's like you can kind of just fund your university out of your paycheck from teaching, I guess, which is nice. So or going home obviously is another option though. But if you are like serious about getting a uni job in Korea though, it's so hard to do that without actually being in Korea because there just isn't phone interviews. Everyone expects you to be in Korea for the interviews. So I'd probably recommend staying in Korea and working at a public school or Hagwon, and then work on your master's degree kind of in your spare time. And then I would like do a lot of networking for sure. So it's like if you can befriend the university teachers in your city, that's kind of like the golden way to get a university job. Because often like places won't even advertise publicly. They'll just say like to their foreign teachers, hey, do you know anyone looking for a uni job? And it's like, that's how jobs get filled. And that's, teachers will like recommend their friends. So they kind of get moved to the top of the list. So networking. And then I guess the best case scenario is that you would already be teaching high school students or adults at a Hagwon, because that's like kind of the key. Because if a university employer sees like, oh, you have a master's in TESOL, but oh, you've only taught like elementary school kids, it's kind of not ideal. So you definitely try to get that experience teaching adults as well.
Awesome. Yeah, that's super interesting. Going back to the midnight run and the Hagwons, is there any tips for like when you're looking at Hagwon jobs to kind of suss out like what a good one is versus like what one is that might make you want to like dash in the middle of the night?
Well, it's kind of like standard practice in Korea, especially like when you phone your school and you're like talking to your boss, that they'll often let you talk to the current foreign teacher who's there or like give you their email or something like that. But I mean, I don't love that actually, because it's like often the boss is like sitting in the room with that person. So it's like, how could that current teacher be honest about like anything really, except like, oh, it's such a great school. So I think the better way is to find like the Facebook group or just ask. There's a forum, waygoop.org. Go on there and ask about like, hey, I got a job offer at like whatever Hagwon in whatever city. Does anyone know anything about it? And someone will probably know something, or or you might even get like the contact for the current teachers there. And I mean, that's often the best indication, actually, of if
What
a
was
school
that?
is like decent or not. Oh, the forum?
Cool. Yeah, what was it called?
Waygoop.org. So WAYGOOK.org. Waygoop is like the it means like foreigner in Korean.
Oh, okay. That's a great name for foreigner. Waygook?
Yeah, it's kind of cool. Waygookin. Yeah.
I like that so much better than gringo. We spend so much time in Latin America. We're so used to gringo.
Yeah, Waygook. I was like, oh, I like it. I like that too. I didn't mind when people told me that for sure.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we've heard from other people about like how you can talk to the teachers, but that there's always like a boss in the room and stuff like that, which I mean, it's like such a bad way of doing that because it's
kind of weird. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely weird. I feel like it just, there almost seems like why waste anyone's time doing it when it's like you can't really say the truth anyways. And like, yeah. I don't know. I think sometimes there's things that maybe one person's okay with, but it's important to mention them in case somebody else doesn't like that type of environment or stuff like that. And I feel like it's hard to be honest when your boss is listening and you're maybe like risking getting fired even if you're happy there. So it's definitely complicated.
Exactly. And I mean, if I was applying for a like Hagwon job, obviously what I think would be a good Hagwon job and what like someone who's been in Korea for 2 or 3 months would think is a good Hagwon job is like so different. So it's like I don't know. It's sometimes not the most accurate representation if you're going to be, if it's a good job or not. It's hard to tell. So, yeah, try to talk to people who've like completed their contracts and are just out of sight, out of mind, and it's like they have no vested interest in lying or anything like that. So, or just like a friend of someone who works there will probably be more honest about it than the actual friend might if they're still currently employed. So. Yeah, it's just tough. It's tough for that, I think.
And I know you focus a lot on Korea, and that's where your experience comes from. You mentioned kind of things getting more competitive in Korea. Are there other countries that seem to be kind of maybe where Korea was like 15 years ago, where there's more opportunities that are a bit easier to get that still offer like lots of the benefits that you get in, a developed country?
Yeah, there's definitely other places in Asia, I think, that are worth checking into. So China, I mean, is an interesting option. It's like, I personally would love the restrictions on the internet and free speech and that kind of thing. But I mean, salaries in China are certainly increasing. And as far as I know, there are a ton of university jobs. And you can often get them without a master's degree. I'm not sure that's the case anymore, but at least it was a few years ago. I just think there's simply just so many jobs and like not enough people that want to fill them. So I think you can get a job there super easily. Some other interesting options are like places in Southeast Asia, like especially Thailand and Vietnam, I think, that have quite good economies. And the salaries for English teachers there are increasing. I think particularly Vietnam, you can make quite a good living. So if I was going to teach abroad again, I would definitely probably consider Vietnam would be my number one choice for a place I'd go back to.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think too, we haven't been to Vietnam for a couple of years now, but at least when we went, our experience was that it was very, very affordable to live there, very affordable to eat, which I think is an added bonus when you're, I guess, starting out with something like this, or maybe if you're looking for a job that's going to kind of, help you live abroad and make some money while you do it. It's really nice to be able to have your cost of living be a little bit lower so that you can use your vacations to go and explore a little bit.
Oh, for sure. Like that's one of the reasons why I love Korea, actually, because like eating and drinking and going out was super cheap and taxis. So any country that kind of has that benefit of like, you can just go out and like not have to cook at home all the time. And I like loved it. That's just kind of one of my top, I guess, criteria that I would consider. Unlike Japan, where it's like you can blow through your whole monthly salary in like a weekend in Tokyo or something like that. It's like so expensive. So yeah, it can be tough to go there or live there, I guess. You have to be pretty frugal with your money.
Yeah, for sure. We love Japan, but yeah, Japan is so expensive. It's crazy.
I know. I had to go for a visa run in Fukuoka one time, and it's like, I don't know, like I think I got there and then like the Korean consulate was closing in a certain amount of time, or I was like, I had to rush. I didn't have time to take the bus. So I just was like, oh, okay, I'll just take a taxi from wherever I was staying or wherever the ferry terminal was or something to like the consulate. And it was like, I don't know, I dropped like, it was like $100 or something. And I was like, oh, like, this is like so ridiculous that I just spent this much money on a taxi ride. Like, what? I was just like, in Korea, this would have been like $10 or something.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
Their transportation is, I mean, the transportation during the day is amazing. They have such a good subway bus system. But yeah, if you like need to get somewhere fast or everything's closed, you're very limited for options in like a gigantic city where it's not just like, oh, I'll walk like 30 minutes. It's like your walk would be like 4 hours getting from one end of the city to the other.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm curious a little bit about like what Korea was like to live, what it was like to live in Korea in terms of like, you know, things that people should know about like the culture and the food and just kind of like what it's like to integrate into a different culture or into the Korean culture as a Canadian.
I don't know, that's a very broad question. I mean, like I loved living in Korea. I just thought it was so fun because people just like to go out and have a good time. And just in all the places I lived in, the two places, not all the places, the two places I lived in, there was like kind of a fun group of like foreigners who did things together. So there would be like poker nights or pool nights or like book club or board game club or hiking club. So I guess my best piece of advice is like become very, very active in whatever you're interested in, and that will kind of open up a whole bunch of doors for you in terms of like meeting people, both foreigners and Koreans who speak English, which is super useful to have a few of those friends for sure in your life to help you in situations. And then for integrating into Korean culture, just like make an effort to go or just to befriend your Korean coworkers for sure. It goes two ways, I guess. I think a lot of people, like especially in public schools and hagwons, when they have kind of like a Korean handler or someone who's responsible for helping them, it's like often take, I think. Like, help me with this, do this for me, I need this, translate this, can you make this phone call for me? But just remember, it's like it goes two ways. And if you put a little bit of effort into like, if they help you, take them out for lunch, or like, if you go to Canada, bring them back a present, something kind of like cool from Canada for them. It can go a really long way to actually turning that into like a friendship, I guess, more than just like a work relationship. And that can be a really fun experience if you become friends with some of your Korean coworkers and they will like take you home for holidays and like invite you out with their family and that kind of thing. So yeah, just remember to give back, I guess, also as well, instead of just taking.
Yeah, I think that's a really awesome point. And I think, like, for us, we've spent quite a bit of time in countries outside of Canada. I think something that people, you know, whether they're living in Asia or Latin America or wherever it is, you always have this, like, balance of, like, finding other expats and creating a bit of community there versus, like, trying to at least get into a network of local friends. And when you can get those experiences, like being able to go visit someone's family and have a really cool experience, like those are the things that stick out in your memory for like years and years and years if you can make it happen. But it's going to require you, you know, getting out of your comfort zone, giving more, and all that type of stuff.
Yeah, for sure. And like I just had some great experiences like traveling around Korea. For example, my friend and I, one summer vacation, we like rode our bikes across Korea. There was this big trail or like along a river that you could do, one of the Nakdong River, the biggest, I guess it's the biggest river, maybe one of the big three rivers in Korea. So we did that, and we actually didn't see another foreign person that whole time. And it was so fun because we actually had to use our kind of meager Korean and like talk to everybody. And like we stayed at some kind of homestays and just had like the best experiences there. And just meeting the other like Korean bikers who were just going along the same trail as us. I mean, it was so fun. And I loved it, but it's like, it took some effort and planning because like there wasn't a lot of information in English, and it was tough, but it was like worth it for sure. And that was one of my best experiences, I think, in Korea. And it was like, just because we met so many amazing Koreans along the way, and just kind of like got out of our normal life, I guess.
And so you mentioned that you moved back to Canada, I think you said about 4 years ago. What was the kind of impetus for that? What made you feel like your time in Korea had reached its end?
I just was not loving the teaching anymore. I think I was like burnt out basically. And at the end, it was tough. Normally I would kind of like, I'd go to class and it was like, a job, but I was like, I have some classes today. Okay, whatever. And just like, it was like a normal thing I would just go do. But probably the last semester, I started to feel kind of like dread about it, and just was like, like 4 classes today. Like I hate this. And I wasn't like, I didn't even care, I guess, about helping the students necessarily. And that had never been my attitude up until then. So that was just kind of my sign that like, okay, like I've had enough. And it was like, even in Korea, like things started to annoy me, like things that I would just kind of laugh at before. I was like, oh, Koreans, like whatever. And just like laugh, like, oh, that weird cultural thing they do. And I would just think it was funny, or like, it actually started to kind of annoy me and get under my skin. And then I was just like, that was another sign too, that it was like, I think I was burnt out on teaching plus burnt out on Korea. So, I decided to go and just do something else. And go back to my home country. So, yeah.
And what was that like? I imagine it's kind of like 10 years living somewhere else. That's a long time that you get really used to it. What was it like living back in Canada all of a sudden?
I mean, I found I had like taken like quite a few months to plan the transition, I guess. So for me, it was like tough initially, finding like a place to live. And I brought my 2 cats back from Korea to Canada with me. So that was like tough, finding a place where I could live with them. And I didn't go back to my parents' hometown. So that would have been easy, but I did not want to go back to Edmonton. So, I mean, I ended up living in like a few different places in those first few months. And it was all this, like, it was probably actually the craziest period of time in my life, actually. But I guess I just kind of pushed through it, and I just thought like, it's going to get better. This is really bad right now. But, and I was like having kind of reverse culture shock about things, like how expensive everything was. I got really stressed out about it. But I did enjoy a lot of it too. It was like, everybody speaks English. Like, it's so easy to go, I have a problem with a government agency, and then I just phone them. It's like, my problem is solved. It was like kind of the novelty factor of that, which I loved. But I guess after a year, everything kind of got settled. And it's just gotten better and better since then. And I'm like happy that I made that transition, but then I'm also happy that I kind of pushed through those like tough times and didn't end up going back to Korea or back teaching abroad, which I think is what a lot of people do. Not a lot, but some people just like, it's tough for a few months and they go back and then end up regretting it. So I kind of had that in the back of my mind, is like, okay, it's not an option to go back. You just have to make it work in Canada no matter what. So
yeah, it's interesting having that like reverse culture shock experience. And we can definitely relate to that experience of like going to the grocery store for the first time, and it's like, oh God, when you like walk out with like 3 bags of groceries and it was like $100 and something, and you're like, how did that cost so much? Or you go out to like, you're walking around, you go out for dinner at a restaurant and you're like so distracted because you can hear everyone's conversations all of a sudden.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
you're like can't not listen and eavesdrop on like everyone around you.
I know, and like now I don't even eat out. I'm just like I just feel like in Korea, my lifestyle from Korea to here has changed so much. It's like I used to love going out all the time. I'd probably go out, I don't know, like 4 or 5 nights a week in Korea and still save like a ton of money. But here in Canada, it's just so expensive. So my life is more boring, I guess, in Canada. But I mean, that's okay. I knew it would have to be like that. And then I'm like to my friend or whatever, I'm like, hey, come over for dinner to my house, which is like, I don't know. It's just kind of a different world than it was in Korea. But
Yeah, we can definitely relate to that. When we lived in Mexico City for about a year, and when we got home, we were like doing a bit of just like low-key grocery shopping, not even a big grocery shop. And I called to order some pizza from our favorite pizza place. And she was like, oh, we ordered like 2, I don't know, like personal sized pizzas and a salad. And she's like, that'll be like $56. And I was like, what? She's like, $56? And I was like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, we'll be there in 30 minutes or whatever to pick it up. And we're like at the grocery store, and it's like, they have like so many great things. Like that's one of the best things about going home, is that you go to like a really nice grocery store and you can find everything you want, but it's like everything costs so much money. And I think we bought like maybe 10 items and spent like another $50. And I'm like, did we just spend like more than we spent in a week of eating on like 10 items of groceries and 2 pizzas?
I know. Well, it's in like the grocery stores compared to like in Canada compared to Korea are actually cheaper. I don't know, for whatever reason, it's like fruit and vegetables and stuff in Korea were so expensive. So I actually find that kind of a refreshing change. But then the restaurants are like, there's no comparison. You could eat out at Korean restaurants for like less than $5 a meal. So it's like, yeah, the grocery store doesn't distress me so much, but yeah, definitely the lack of like, or when I go out for a meal and it's like $20 or more than $20, I just think, oh, this is like so much money.
I feel like $20 for a meal out in Vancouver is like so cheap too.
I know. I only go to like, I go to the sushi places and get like a 3-roll set or something for like $12.99 or something, but that's like not a nice meal. It's just like, that's kind of like, you just go there for if you're hungry and are like out. It's like, but a nice meal, yeah, is like $30 or whatever, something like that. So
yeah, for sure.
Too much.
Yeah, definitely. We can definitely relate to that. I'm curious, what have you been doing over the last 4 years in terms of your English teaching? Like, how has that shifted since you got back to Canada and that sort of thing?
Sure. So when I first got back to Canada, I did some work in the movie industry or the film industry here in Vancouver. So I just kind of like fell into it through a friend whose aunt worked in the industry, and she was like, oh, you should do this for a little bit. And I was like, oh, that sounds interesting. So I did a first aid certificate, industrial first aid. And then I became like a first aid attendant. So I did that for about 2 years because I just think I was like not into feeling excited about the teaching at all. So I just kind of used that to take a break. And it was really interesting. It was an interesting job for that period of time, and actually really well paying. So I mean, that actually helped make the transition to Canada so much easier, just having such a good paying job. But then I started to miss teaching. So I've done a little bit of like private tutoring just with like a couple people that I know, and a friend on my tennis team owns an English academy. So she asked me to teach a couple of her students. So I've been doing that. But yeah, I haven't really gotten into the teaching here in Vancouver. There are a lot of opportunities, but it's just I've been focusing on mostly writing books and then working on my website. So yeah, that's my main thing I have going on right now. So yeah.
Awesome. And if people are interested in thinking about teaching, where should they go to check out your books, to find more of your resources?
Sure. So the best places you can go, all my books are on Amazon. So just amazon.ca or amazon.com or co.uk or just whatever country you're in. You can just search for Jackie Bolen. So Jackie Bolen, Bolen. And then you'll just see all my books that I have there. Or you can go to my 2 websites. So for the first one is eslspeaking.org. And the second one is eslactivity.org. So yeah, either of those two websites will have links and all the details to all my stuff, and lots of games and activities and resources for English teachers are there as well. So I think you'd find it really helpful if you need an activity or a game or something for your classes coming up.
Awesome. Amazing. We'll make sure that there's links to all of that on the show notes. And yeah, thank you so much for your time today, Jackie. It's been awesome chatting with you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on your podcast.
To find more information, relevant links, and photos talked about in this week's episode, check out theworldwanderers.com.
If you have a question, comment, or feedback, send us an email at info@theworldwanderers.com. Join our community on Facebook at The World Wanderers or on Twitter at World Wanderers 1. As always, thanks so much for listening.
Have a great day.
Bye.